Hey guys, this is a casual fan, and Formula One is back this weekend. Now, the season has been a bit predictable, maybe a bit boring as well for a few. We've seen the comments on social media. But yeah, this weekend, this time around, we have the Dutch Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is on the verge of equaling Sebastian Vettel's record for 9 wins in a row. Well, to be fair, when a driver is winning as many as 9 races in a row, it does give signs of a very predictable season. Well, that's what it's been this time around. However, there are still quite a few interesting storylines and quite a few things that we need to get to as we preview the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix. And then later in the video, I'll share my predictions on how I expect the weekend to unravel. So without further ado, let's get to the main part of the video and let's begin the preview and predictions for the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, first of all, the preview is divided into three parts. The three parts will have first the key storylines, then we'll take a look at the form guide, as in a driver or a team that is in form, and then the one that is not. And then finally, we'll take a look at the MVP of the weekend, the driver or the team that would probably have the biggest spotlight on it this weekend. First of all, let's begin with the key storylines. Now, first of all, in the key storylines, the biggest one has to be Max Verstappen being on the verge of equaling Sebastian Vettel's record for 9 consecutive race wins. Now, talking about this record, I remember the 2013 season when by the time Vettel reached 9 consecutive wins, it was a tough watch because, well, he was so dominant and there was no competition at all. That Red Bull, in all fairness, it was arguably a more dominant car than the one that we have right now, because this Red Bull can, if a driver or a team tends to put together a lap, it can be beaten in qualifying. However, that particular Red Bull, you could not get close to it. That was arguably a more perfect machinery than this one. Having said that, if Max is able to match Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 consecutive wins, that's just another feather in the cap of an already impressive career at just 25 years of age. Now, coming to the second key storyline, it is around the upgrade for Aston Martin and Ferrari. Whatever I've read, it seems that both Aston Martin and Ferrari are going to be the teams that are bringing quite a few significant parts to the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, it is very important to see how these pan out, because I think the second half of the season is going to be very crucial in finding out how the pecking order is going to stack up ultimately, and if these teams can actually close the gap to Red Bull. We can just hope, because at the end of the day, we do want competition, and if that happens, good for us. There is another thing though, and that is around Aston Martin, because right now Aston Martin is facing its first biggest setback since the fairy tale run in the first half, where it secured consecutive podiums. This is the first time Aston Martin has to bounce back. Whether the team can get it done or not, I think the pedigree of the team is going to be tested right now. And if the team is able to bounce back from this, it is going to show that the team is in for the long haul at the front of the grid. Now, finally, the third talking point, well, the rain is forecast this weekend. Apparently, it's still not clear. There have been multiple sources, but through all of them, you can see that there is going to be some rain, some disruption by rain. Now, whether that has an impact or not in the race, and whether it will make things a bit more unpredictable, I think we have to see. I think we also need to see how a track like Zandvoort, where the track is still a bit narrow as compared to others, how rain can spice things up, and what will be the possible impact at the pecking order and the racing as well. So yeah, maybe if rain does prove to be a disruption, it could make things very interesting. Now, moving on from the key storylines to the form guide. And first of all, when we talk about a team or driver that is in form, I think except Red Bull and Max Verstappen, that is it has arguably become the norm to pick that combination. I think this time around I'm going to go with Ferrari and Charles Leclerc. Securing pole position, getting a podium in Belgium, it was very impressive. And I think that also showed that if Ferrari can put together a weekend, it tends to get the desired results. It was interesting to also see that the race pace, it did not fade. And even compared to Mercedes, the pace was still there. So maybe positive signs, although of course there is a caveat that the track layout in Spa is a lot different to what we have in Zandvoort. However, the team is still, I feel it will come to the Dutch Grand Prix a bit confident of its prospects. So it will be interesting to see how it does. Now, talking about who is out of form, I think we have to pick Aston Martin, because ever since the Austrian Grand Prix, something has gone wrong. The team went from being, well, almost claiming to challenge Max Verstappen for a win in Canada, to a team that has been a bit anonymous since then. Austria was weird. To be fair, even Silverstone was not impressive. And slowly but steadily, there has been a drop. Now, Aston Martin has alluded to the fact that maybe some of it has to do with the upgrades that it brought in Canada. Now, how much of a mitigation effort has already been put in and how much of changes are going to be there in the team, I think we have to see. But for now, it does appear that Aston Martin is on the back foot coming into the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, moving on from the form guide, let's take a look at the MVP of the weekend. And I don't think it's going to be a surprise, but Max Verstappen is going to be the man that is going to have the biggest spotlight on him. Not only because he's about to level the 9 consecutive race wins from Sebastian Vettel, but also because it's his home race. And it does appear that he is a huge celebrity in Netherlands. And yeah, this weekend is entirely going to revolve around him. Let's see how it pans out because, well, he's been undefeated in Zandvoort and he'll be hoping to continue that run. Now let's move to the predictions part for the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, when I talk about predictions, what I'm trying to share in this particular section is how I expect the weekend to pan out. Now, essentially, I'm not going to share that probably Lewis Hamilton is going to finish in P5. That is not something that I'm going to do in this particular section. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share how I expect certain things to happen during the weekend. So I think it's better I share my predictions and I'll let you be the judge of whether it is the right way to go about things or not. So yeah, you can drop the views in comments regarding this, and let's begin and let's take a look at my predictions or how I expect the weekend to pan out at the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, the first prediction is in terms of qualifying, I expect there to be a very close battle for pole position. Unless it rains, which is obviously going to make things very interesting anyway. Even if it doesn't, the battle for pole position is going to be very interesting. Now, the reason behind that is Zandvoort is characteristically a track that has a lot of slow speed sections. This is somewhat similar to how the track in Hungary was. And if we remember correctly, Hungary was a track where Lewis Hamilton secured pole position ahead of Max Verstappen. So this time around as well, I expect there to be a very, very close battle between probably Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren. These are the 4 teams that I expect to be in the battle for pole position this time around. It will be interesting to see how the qualifying pans out because the lap is also very small. So the margins are going to be much, much shorter, and it will be a very interesting qualifying session for sure. Now, coming to the second prediction, irrespective of how close the qualifying is, ultimately I feel Max is going to win the race quite comfortably. And I think this is something that we've seen again in Hungary as well, because while Red Bull tends to lose a bit in qualifying, the ultimate strength of that car is the race pace, and in the races the gap is easily close to 6 to 7 tenths. I think another factor that could come into play is the tire life. Now, Red Bull tends to keep its tires alive a lot longer than its competitors, and I think that is also going to play a role. All in all, I think Max Verstappen wins his 9th consecutive race and equals Sebastian Vettel's record. Now, my third prediction, and it is somewhat similar and somewhat in line with the entire theme. In my view, I feel Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes are going to be in the battle for podium. In this case, ultimately, I think it will come down to very narrow margins. You have to be perfect when it comes to strategy. If rain plays a role, again, you have to be very, very nimble when it comes to how, when you're going to change tires, what strategy you're going to opt. Overall, when you think on all these lines, Ferrari is one name that you feel is going to get compromised here. However, still, when we talk about the speed and the performance, I think Ferrari will still be in contention. It will be interesting to see what happens, but when it comes to the battle for a podium, I feel we might see a battle between these 3 teams. Next up, I feel Sergio Perez is going to have an off weekend. Now, the reason behind that is somewhat simpler because at the end of the day, we expect the qualifying session to be very close. Now, when the qualifying session is close, what it means is that Max Verstappen will be competing with the likes of Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren. Now, what that happens is the normal deficit between Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen is around 3 to 4 tenths at the minimum. If that is the case this time around as well, Perez will get out qualified by the McLaren, by the Mercedes, and by the Ferrari. Now, in the race where the true strength of Red Bull shines, Perez might be able to make up a few places. He might even end up on the podium. But again, when you're getting out qualified by these 3 slower cars, essentially, it does not show well on the record. And That's where my prediction comes in. I expect Perez to have a somewhat off weekend. And in my view, I don't think he finishes on the podium because Zandvoort is a track that is not easy to overtake. Plus, the bigger issue is that rain could play a role. So, at all times, you have to be very adaptive. And Perez has not shown that recently. So, yes, in my view, Perez has a bad weekend this time around. Now, the next prediction is somewhat predictable because I feel Alpine and Aston Martin are going to be fighting for whatever is left in terms of the points finishes. I feel Aston Martin has taken a step back. The upgrades that the team has brought, they will take some time to help Aston Martin get back on the pace. For now, though, I don't expect a huge jump. I expect Aston Martin to pretty much battle it out against Alpine to see who ultimately secures the points finish. Finally, in my view, the last prediction, I feel Alfa Romeo is going to be a wild card. Now, the reason behind that is again going back to what happened in Hungary. Hungary was a track that pretty much suited Alfa Romeo quite impressively as Zhou Guanyu finished, I think if he qualified P5 in that particular race. There is also history behind this as well because Alfa Romeo had brought in a few upgrades. A floor upgrade, I think, was also there, and also a new front wing. And ultimately, by the time the circus reached Hungary, the team had been finally able to figure out how to make the best use of them. Now, at this stage, Zandvoort might play to their strengths. Again, it's just a hunch because Alfa Romeo has been a very unpredictable team. So yes, in my view, Alfa Romeo might be a bit of a wild card here. The team might have a good weekend where it's able to make use of the newfound strengths it had in Hungary. Or on the other hand, we might see the team getting back to being pretty much anonymous on the grid, just like it has been for the rest of the season. So yes, these are my predictions, and this concludes the preview and predictions for the Dutch Grand Prix. What's your view? Do let me know in the comment section. I hope you guys liked the video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching and see you next time.